I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello, and welcome to Season 34, Episode 3 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy.
I'm Jason.
I'm Riley.
And in today's episode, Eric from New Jersey says bleed doesn't have to be a bad thing. Ansem from California asks, what games make your collection cut? And from the archive, this one's actually from 2017, Sam from Lakewood asks about sci-fi versus fantasy.
Ooh.
Very exciting. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. Or you can post in the mailbag channel in the Discord. Please do that. We're running out of things to talk about. We can only provide you with this delicious content while we have content to provide. So, do the thing. Announcements. JackerCon is coming up on July 12th through the 14th. That's really, really soon. That is next weekend. It is an epic weekend of online gaming and a long tradition in our Happy Jacks community. Come play at happyjacks.org/discord. It's totally free. You come in, you see the games that are there. I think there's like 11 games right now currently being posted. And you just like join in and you can run a game, you can play a game, you can do all the things. There's not a cutoff. So if you'd like get an idea for a game on Wednesday night, you can still go post it and see if anyone wants to run it. And yeah, so do that. It's super fun. I'm very excited about it. And Starscape is kickstarting July 9th, which honestly, by the time you're listening to this, is probably already passed because it's in about 30 hours and I have so much stuff to do between now and that moment. I am not going to process the audio for this, but right now you can go to goldenlassogames.com/Kickstarter and hopefully help the campaign. Do the thing. It's fine. I'm not nervous. It's okay. Everything's good. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Okay. It's July, which means we have an Indie Designer of the Month again. Woo! Our July Indie Designer of the Month is Graham Gintz. He, they. And you can find his stuff at grahamgintz.itch.io. That's GRAHAMGENTZ. And you can go to linktree.ee /Graham Gintz and find all his social media stuff. This week, we're going to talk about one that I saw the title immediately. I was like, well, that's the one we have to talk about. It's called Ooze Your Daddy. And you are slimes, oozes, goos, and gunks. You live free and wild in the world, multiplying by splitting yourself and moistly slurping along. But there's a great secret. The identity of the first ooze, the ooze daddy, has never been known. You are determined to solve it for ooze kind once and for all. So this very delightful title and very fun concept is actually a lasers and feelings hack. And you can get it for $5 on grahamgintz.itch.io. And all of the profits are going to First Collective 614 to assist in providing supplies and medical care for the unhoused. And yeah, it's just a cute little delightful, amazing game. So yeah. Happy to have an Indie Designer of the Month again. It feels right. It feels like we've had like not one for too long. And it's just, I know we had a break in there, but it's just like, I feel like I haven't talked about a designer for a while.
Yeah.
So, all right. All right, mailbag number 1. 1, 2, 3, not it.
I'll go.
Okay. Before I just want to offer this up to you.
Okay.
Do you want to let us take care of the rest of the show and you can go work on more Kickstarter stuff? I know you're very stressed and overworked, and I'm happy to let you have that.
That
Seconded.
is, I am so tempted.
If there's 2 of us here, we could do that.
Yeah.
I know the podcast business is not good on mic, but I'm giving you this lifeline.
I appreciate. I think I'm in a place where I'm okay.
Okay.
And I do need a little bit of a break because I've literally been doing that for like the
Fair.
last 3 days straight.
Sure.
We just won't make it one of those epic 3-hour episodes.
Yeah. Oh,
2
yeah.
hours, 59 minutes tops.
Yeah.
All right. Before we got into mailbags, I was like, this is going to be the chance that I give Kimmy the chance to decide you're on a minecart. There's 2 paths, and I'm letting you decide which path you want to
I
go.
appreciate it. I might regret this choice later, but I'm happy.
I wrote a
being here
note
right
to
now.
Jason, and he didn't see it, so I was like, okay, I'm going to ask Kimmy
sorry.
directly. Like,
Totally
okay,
fine.
okay,
It's all
cool.
good.
All right, I'll take the first mailbag now because I offered to already.
But I appreciate
Sure.
appreciate you.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Hello, Kimmy and the Happy Jacks crew. Recently on the show, don't ask me which episode it was. I'm middle-aged and forget such stuff.
Amen.
Same, my friend. There was conversation about bleed, and it seemed to be made out to be a dirty word. I would like more clarification on this because while certain types of bleed can be dangerous, what I understand as bleed is not a dirty word, but more of a cautionary tale.
Should we
Yeah,
pause
can
real
we-
quick and just define how we...
Because I wasn't on that
interpret
episode.
Yeah. So we talked about, it was a discussion. It's been dipped into a couple. I think Clara was on that episode. Again, I also don't know. It was literally like 2 weeks ago. But so bleed is basically when in-game feelings, things that your characters are feeling, bleeds over into real life. So
Okay.
when you leave the table, like if your character's angry or sad about something, that you get so wrapped up in it that you take it away. It doesn't have to be negative feelings, but often that's the type we talk about the most because that is kind of harmful, which I think might be coming up in this email. So
Right. And in the performance world as well, this can happen in theater and TV sets and
yeah.
movies, and often it's why a couple who are playing a couple in a movie fall for each other because they're feeling these feelings,
Right.
and then what do you know? A year later, it didn't work out because
Yeah.
they
In
weren't.
fact, Jason, I would like to read you the next line of this script, email, which is, I was first introduced to the concept of bleed in theater, where you could see various actors who played opposite one another find attraction outside their roles. I witnessed this cause all sorts of breakups and relationship problems. Back in the 90s when I started LARPing, again,
yeah.
hello, hi, I was very fearful of this, even though I commonly played TTRPGs for the immersion factor. Thus, initially, in the 1920s cosmic horror LARP I played in, my choices were very external. As the years went by, though, I found myself having moments where things were at the forefront real. While I was in the driver's seat, it was more of a backseat while I internalized the character's decisions. This immersion was epic. There are times I let the emotions of a scene flow now and enjoy the emotional immersion of it all. There was a time I just broke down and started sobbing at the LARP over a scene, and it was extremely cathartic, like watching a sad movie and getting emotional over that. Also, bleed can work in the opposite ways. I have only been in romantic LARP relationships or bitter, hated rivalries with my closest friends. This is because of a level of trust needed to play either type of relationship without it affecting your real-world relationship. There are check-in tools during the game. My regular LARP uses the thumbs up, thumbs down check-in, plus just checking in outside of game. My LARP romantic partner is my best friend, and we always talk out of game about being the power couple of the LARP. Plus, I always do a check-in with her husband to make sure he's comfortable with the in-game stuff. I guess what I'm trying to say is bleed isn't a bad thing so much as you have to know the tools that work for you to make it enjoyable. Granted, I am not the best with how to phrase things, and I struggle to come up with the correct phrase to address something that I disagreed with. Of course, your mileage may vary. I would probably not recommend a new player try some of this without knowing what tools work for them. Maybe you need to be LARPing for almost 30 years to be in a comfortable spot with bleed. Or maybe we are not coming at it from the same angle, and what I consider bleed is not what you consider it at all. I don't know. It's something you have to be aware of, much like if you introduce harm to the helpless, for example, in a TTRPG. But I don't think it should be out and avoided for every person. Anyway, I hope you stay gaming, stay tipsy, and stay diverse. Mugs held high. Eric from New Jersey. Oh, sorry. Mugs held high. Eric from New Jersey. I thought Mugs held high was like a call sign.
Yeah.
Like that, like their signature.
Yeah, Mugs held high. Eric from New Jersey. P.S. For those near Eastern PA, specifically Hamburg, my regular LARP's next game day is Labor Day weekend. I invite the entirety of the Happy Jacks who are within striking distance to come. Just let me know, and I will announce you on the Discord when the event opens registration. You can PC, NPC, or a mix. People who solely NPC only pay for food unless they bring their own.
Oh.
Which is still
Awesome.
paying for food. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that what Eric's describing here is bleed, because it sounds like there are very strong boundaries, and it's a lot of like,
Yep.
oh, I'm not letting this affect my out of game relationships. Well, then it's not bleed, because like
Right.
bleed is when it does affect your. So I feel like you have actually set up a lot of really good safety tools to prevent what
Right.
I would think of as bleed personally.
Or to handle it, because I think you can have those feelings and then like recognize them as what they are with the help of tools so that it doesn't impact your life.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Well, I see
don't
it as like bleed is bad in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bleed is bad because you're reacting to emotions and stuff that aren't really what you're feeling, or what, like, something about your situation's been manipulated. And I think probably the most relatable analogy I can use is like when you're wearing a Kevlar vest to not get shot. You know that getting shot is bad. So if you get shot in the vest, it stops the bullet. You have not been shot.
Yeah.
Right? It stops it before it hurts you. So what Eric is doing is awesome, right? Is doing the care, is taking care of each other. Everybody in that LARP seems to be doing really healthy behavior.
Yeah.
And I would say Eric is actively defending and like protecting himself and the people around him from bleed, but is not experiencing bleed.
Yeah, because like this comment of like watching a sad movie and getting emotional over that. I don't think having an emotional response to a movie is bleed, personally. I think that like saying if my experience is like watching a movie, I think that's a healthy way to experience emotions while participating in an activity, because like you're like, it's okay to be like, I don't think bleed is the same thing as being emotionally affected by the things that you're consuming or participating in. Like, I think that like if you're looking at it from the point of view of like, oh, this scene was really sad and I participated in it and it made me sad as a piece of art or a piece of group storytelling,
right,
that is not the same as I am really sad because I'm the character, like, because I'm not able to separate myself from the character that was in that scene, and that's what feels more like bleed to me.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I like that delineation, because yeah, we do have moments where, you know, we're sobbing while we watch a movie. We aren't confused or thinking we are in the story.
Sure.
Like, we are not thinking this is happening to me.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. Yeah, I like that difference a lot. I think that clears up, because I was sort of thinking that, oh, you know, if you leave and you're feeling those feelings, like you're going to have those.
No,
you know,
I mean,
just-
we play
yeah.
these games to have big feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like I do. And that's awesome. Or watch a movie and cry. Like, that's fine. I'm not crying because that person died. It's the concept of it, and this was beautifully told and whatever.
And the empathy of it.
Yeah, but like that actor didn't actually die, right? And I think another really good actual a practical example of bleed is having an argument with somebody in the game and coming away and still being mad at that person for what their character did.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if they're making shitty character choices and that's what my character would do, like that's a whole other conversation.
That's you being mad at them for
Right.
their choices.
Right.
That's different
Yeah.
than
But,
characters
like,
being mad at
Being
each
mad at somebody for the way they're playing is not the same as being mad at it for what their character did in character.
Right,
Yes.
Like,
right. And when everyone's checking in and doing good, you know, like game, you know, safety tools and all this kind of stuff, that's what we want to get to, right? Because we want it to be more than just a board game, right? If we wanted a board game, we could go play Warhammer, right? Which is, it's not even a diss on Warhammer. Don't come for me.
That's what it's for.
right?
Like, yeah, it's strategy.
Okay.
It's a board game without feelings, right? It's not meant to have them. That's not what's built into it. It's blast each other to smithereens and have a good time doing it. Great. I want feelings in my games.
So, yeah, I want to ask both of you, like, what you both think. Is it bad if you have good feelings in a game? Is that bleed bad?
Define good.
Well, I don't know. Like,
If I'm falling in love with the person my
okay,
character's in
that's
love
more
with,
complicated.
that's bad.
Yes. No.
That's not complicated, it's bad.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I'm
to
falling in
me-
love with the character.
To me, it really falls under like the same thing of like, are you having good feelings because a really fun and entertaining thing happened and you were part of it? Or are you having good feelings because you're associating yourself with your character having good things and like, oh, my life's going great or whatever? It's like hard to tell, because I actively have tried to keep myself from bleeding into things a lot. So,
Yeah.
because I'm a neurodivergent person, it's really easy for me to get emotionally wrapped up in things.
Yeah.
And so I can't think of examples of times where I was bleeding into my like emotions in a way that was like, even was a positive emotion, like, oh, that was good. Like,
Right.
because it could be detrimental, because like, let's say you're having a situation in your life. I'm going to tread on very like tenuous ground here. I don't want to get into like mental health things, stuff like that too much.
Yeah.
But if you are like dealing with things in reality in a way that like might need your attention and your focus, and
Right.
you're ignoring them because you're getting like the positive feelings from something, like it's not at that point. It's like when it becomes like is it any different than like, oh, I was supposed to be doing some stuff, but I spent 3 days playing video games instead, like to ignore my problems. Like, is that any better in that sense?
Yeah.
So that I just cut a really wide berth around that. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to like get too deep into individual stuff. But I do think that is where it's like, are you feeling good because you genuinely enjoyed something, or are you feeling good because you're making yourself think of yourself as the character you're playing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I frequently, and when my partner could tell you, if somebody takes a knee, proposes, sets up a prom question, if they're at a wedding, like any of these things on TV, I'm choked up. And because I love it, I love, and I like to see it. But I'm not there because I think these people are actually getting married, right? That's okay. What I love is love, and they're portraying it and they're telling a story that I'm really enjoying. Or maybe it's a 30-second dog food commercial and somebody's proposing and whatever, but it still is like, I love that idea so much, of like people committing to each other, and that is just so beautiful conceptually that if that happens, I'm in it emotionally right away. That activates
But you're not
me.
turning to your partner and being
Right.
like, "Yeah, we should go do some stuff like that."
Right,
It's like,
right.
Yeah.
It's not, but it doesn't translate. And I think when it does, you're experiencing a real like tricky place in your life that is
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, like a great example is even in Eric's email here, where Eric's talking about the fun relationship that he has with his friend who plays his romantic partner in game, but he's very aware that like this is actually my friend's partner in real life. She and I are not romantically involved with
Right.
each other, and I have checked in to make sure that like her partner doesn't feel like we're crossing any boundaries. I make sure she doesn't think I'm crossing any boundaries with her. Like, to me, that feels like cause that's an example of where, like, again, it's tough because when you're bringing romance into it as well.
Yeah.
But that's a really example of like a positive feeling in game. And if you start to bleed over and be like, oh, I'm attracted to this person because my character's attracted to him, like that does feel a little bit like,
Right.
I don't think it's always, I think if it bleeds the other way, it can be okay. Like, I think when people who are romantic partners, if they're playing like a home game and like it's okay, like I don't mind as much if like they want to have their characters have a romantic thing as well sometimes, but even then it still has to be
It
like,
gets annoying.
it can be like, hey, is that now going to make it hard for the other players of the game to enjoy the game? Like,
Yeah.
it can be
Yeah.
obnoxious. But I can understand if somebody wants to play their character romantically and they might have a hard time feeling comfortable doing that outside of their own relationship in real life, even if it's character.
Yeah.
I can see them being like, well, I want to play this, but you're the only person I feel comfortable playing it with. Maybe, but that still can be rough for the rest of the table. But
Yeah, I actually had that exact thing happen one time, and it was before we started streaming games, so you're not going to know who it is. But but it was a long time ago. It was a while ago, and me and this other player were in one of Stu's games, and we kind of we were definitely like there was a spark there, but we were both in other relationships, and it was one of those things where it was like, oh, we're going to do this in game. Oh, this is a mistake.
oh yeah, that's not what I
We
meant.
have a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of feels now. Let's see. Let's backtrack this. I think I should opt out of this game. It was just like really,
Yeah, that sounds rough.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah. I mean, my relationship at the time was ending anyways, so I think that might have had something to do with it. But
Yeah.
we never ended up doing anything about it. But it was one of those things where suddenly it was like, oh, I don't know if we can be friends like we were anymore. Cool. I'll see you at the next whatever barbecue or something. But yeah, and it's hard. And it's one of those things that's sort of like the chicken and the egg question. It's like, did we try and do a romance in game because we were already sort of attracted to each other? Or were we, because of that romance in game, did we then become more attracted to each other? I don't know. It's very strange.
A lot of times when you have a fake romance trope in romantic stories, usually the two parties were already attracted, and that's why they both agreed to the fake romance trope.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And Fair was really bad for this too. I imagine it's very much like LARPs, where you've got this weird mix of you're all dressed up and you're all in your costumes, and you're a character part of the day, but then you also talk to each other out of character. So there's this weird line of it being like this Fey realm where it's not real life. It's like you're being you, but kind of different than you. And so yeah, people do the same thing where they they fall really hard for each other. And then at the end of the at the end of the season, they're like, oh, we're going to be together forever. And then like 2 months later, they broke up. And you're like, yeah, it's different when you have to wear like jeans and t-shirts every day.
Hang on, I'm taking notes from my brain favorite romance novel that
Oh my God, I have so
writing.
much juice to tell you. Oh my
And like go to work and do the dishes and do the,
Yeah.
like suddenly all this like regular boring everyday shit that normal couples have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not May Day in an English village every day where you
Right.
get to jump around in the maypole and wear corsets and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that whole moment in High Fidelity when at the end he's like, "Oh, I was crushing on this girl because she was the fantasy, but like she doesn't have to, like
yeah.
that's that whole element of it." Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like that's like that. And I feel like crushing and like anger are the two most dangerous bleeds, probably.
yeah, and like that's definitely like I think that the
I think we
talk
got off
here-
topic for bleed not being a bad thing, but
Yeah, I think one thing's hard because like I think that what's being discussed here isn't bleed. Like I do think, like I said earlier, I think there's a distinction between. I think that's why we talk about when we play with our like this comment about, oh, I'm in the back seat, but like I'm also like I'm in the moment. I don't think of that as bleed. I think of that as being like engaged in
Right.
storytelling. Like that's essentially what you're doing as an actor, and like that's why bleed
Yeah,
can
you're
be a
an
problem.
engaged
Yeah.
performer, which is a good way to perform, in
Yeah.
my opinion. But
Yeah. It's like you got to be drift compatible. You don't want to get lost in the
yes,
drift. You know?
thank you. To me, if it's bleed, it's bad. What's being
Yeah.
described here is not bleed, to me, to the way I think about bleed. And I don't think there's a version of bleed that's good, right? Like, oh, you felt something from the game? That's great.
Yeah.
We had emotions, we had big feelings. I love that. But that's not the same as bleed.
Yeah.
So,
I think bleed is what happens when you stop realizing that the emotions you're getting are
Yeah.
from consuming
yeah,
entertainment.
there's a little bit of a break with reality there.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know. I'm very compartmentalized with my emotions just generally in life. So it's like it's hard for me because other than that one example, like I haven't had a lot of experience personally with bleed. Like it's very separate. I don't know, maybe because I practice so hard, like at school, like as a teacher, like
Yeah.
I compartmentalize so hard there. Like
Yeah.
I am Miss Hughes. I am a professional adult. Listen to and respect me.
Well, I don't know how much you've had to deal with this, but I had to deal with student crushes on me. And having to like be really clear about what's happening and what's not happening, and like informing other teachers and being like, hey, can somebody watch when I meet with this student because they're being a little like they're
Yeah.
having a moment, and they're teenagers, right? Like they get unstuck from reality sometimes.
Yeah.
That happens. This is what they're going through.
Yeah, their whole body is like a machine making
Right.
hormones to make weird things happen to them. Yeah.
Right. And it's not like, oh, wow, I'm so wonderful. It's just that we have a good relationship, and then that rapport, the wires get crossed.
Yeah.
And, well, that happens sometimes. So just having some, being gentle with somebody and like walking them back to it, that's my most of my experience. And then there have been a couple times where, having an argument in game in a home game or something before I was more familiar with safety tools
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. There definitely were some bad feelings and stuff. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Where I can run into problems is if something is a thing that is triggering to me in real life, then like it's sometimes hard for me to recognize that like I remember I had a game before I ever came on Happy Jacks. I was on one of my earliest streaming games. We like started a game where my character had done something pretty risky in the previous game, and without any warning, one of the other players that started the next game just like started shouting at my character, and it was a thing where, looking back on it, I'm like, if a little heads up would have been great.
Yeah.
But like for me, I especially have a really hard time with specifically men yelling at me.
Yeah.
And like that was really rough. And it was like, I understand from his point of view, it was like I was just in character role playing and that was the thing happening. And I'm not even putting it up as like, well, that's what my character would have done.
Right.
It actually made sense in the game for his character to do that. But it felt like a thing where like I wish he had said to me ahead of time, like, hey, I'm gonna come in pretty hot, so just
Yeah.
be aware of it. Because like for me, it like put me like I think the scene was actually great because I was so put off guard by it that like I got to play this like very like morally dubious character who was like turning everything he was saying back on him or whatever. But like in my mind, I was like so in like defense mode,
Yeah.
and it was like really, and like that's where I'm like, I don't know if that counts as bleed, if like not being able to like turn off my own personality or emotions while I'm in a game.
Yeah.
I feel like it does. Yeah.
I mean, I think if you talk about, again, we're not psychologists or psychiatrists, and everyone should get help that they need. But if you talk to people who've experienced PTSD, I've not been diagnosed with that, but I have experienced trauma in my life, and the moments of reliving something like that, or a trigger that is close to something like that, it's similar because you're having a break with reality. You're having a okay, this isn't the person who yelled at you when you were 8.
Yeah.
I understand that intellectually, but it sucks because all the feelings of 8-year-old me are here up at the top of my chest now.
Yeah.
And it's hard to deal with in the moment,
Yeah.
right? That's bleed.
Yeah.
And it's not good for you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
I think it's I don't know, just if there's a socket and there's some water, it just makes you more, if you're wet, you just are more likely to channel the electricity into yourself.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think having those vulnerabilities are something you have to be aware of to prevent bleed, because you're just so much more likely to take it in, and even if you logically know this isn't real, your body and your mind is much more likely to react to it like it's real.
Yeah.
So
Like
yeah,
when I was I have a very specific PTSD about someone putting their hand on my shoulder from behind me, because that's when I was attacked. That's what happened. And sorry, I should have
No,
trigger
it's
warning.
okay. It's
For the
okay.
audience listening, I should have trigger warning that. I'm sorry. But I, to this day, if somebody comes up behind me and just friendly tries to do it, I have almost hit people because my whole every single muscle in my body reacts like that.
Yeah.
And I'm better about it now than I was. But there was a time, I would say like 2 or 3 years, especially out of that incident, I remember. So going on the whole bleed thing, I was like, yeah, but there's you're right, your physical body, your brain knows this wasn't that happening, but your physical body is nope, the sequence was activated and we're doing all the things we have to do to stop it.
Right.
And it's wild how how fast it happens.
Yeah, that's why I have to be really careful when I'm playing in games where people are there might be some alcoholism or addiction, because that's something I grew up in a household with that. So it's something I am much more likely to take to heart. And same thing with children harm and stuff right now. For obvious reasons, am much more vulnerable to that becoming something I carry back with me, even if I know it's not a real person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one of my number one lines and veils on any sheet. There's a lot that I can be pretty yellow or open with, depending on who I trust as a GM or DM. But when it comes to child harm, I'm nope, that's a hard no for me, no matter what.
Yeah. All right. Good email. Thank you for sharing, Eric.
The second one, and I'm happy to read the third one too, because the second one's so short.
Okay.
But this second one was tailor-made for me.
Okay, ready to go.
Hello, GMs, DMs, keepers, and associated deities of your narrative demiplanes.
It was.
It's not over yet. I am quite a rules-brained person, and I love finding and collecting RPG rule sets that are mechanically interesting or are at least different from what I already have. Dice pools, percenti, rollover, roll under, Jenga towers. I collect all types of mechanical systems. That's also me. This is exciting. My collection has started to get out of hand, as there is no way I will ever be able to play all these rule sets fully. I've actually converted my monthly Pendragon group into a new one-shot every session group.
Oh.
So that we can try as many systems as possible. Kudos to you for accomplishing that.
Amazing. That is so cool.
However, the drive for more games doesn't abate. How do you find and decide what new RPG belongs in your collection, especially for more experimental games? To the health of your respective stories, Ansem from California. Cheers. So, for me, the healthiest thing I've been able to do is go to the Games on Demand at the local convention. And any convention I go to, I'll try to go to at least one Games on Demand session. So, the people there usually have finger on the pulse of what's new, what's hot, what's coming out, what didn't work, what did work.
Yeah.
And this is speaking as I'm a technology professional. I have a lot of experience working in technology. I'm a computer programmer. I understand how the internet works in great detail. I fucking hate going to Reddit. I just don't go. I have it. I have looked at it. I hate going to Reddit. I hate looking this stuff up on my own. I like talking to people. And I will talk to people about the games they've made or the games they played or whatever is happening. And and I'm not even saying don't go to Reddit. I hate it. If you like it and you get something good out of it, I understand that happens intellectually. Kimmy loves Reddit. You heard it here first.
I'm sorry, a place where I can like anonymously argue with people in more than 240 characters?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
please.
also don't like arguing with people.
Why I don't go on Reddit, because I'm trying to stop arguing with people online or
Yeah.
in general. But
That'd
yeah,
be a very healthy choice for me.
However,
I get a lot of bleed from online arguments,
Yeah.
so I need to like stop doing it.
So
I'm
anyway,
yeah.
finding new game systems. I really like podcasts. So this podcast in particular, I've gotten a lot of good information from. Asians Represent is another great podcast. Dice Exploder is another great podcast for learning about indie systems. Used to be Plus One Forward, but I bet you could still find their back catalog somewhere. There was a bunch of good stuff for PBTA games there, including an interview with moi. So that's what I like to do to find indie games that are doing something different, right? If you're talking about like, Star Trek Adventures, we're gonna roll 2d20 and roll under, like, okay, that's still a d20 resolution mechanic, and I'm not that excited about it. Sorry. It's
I mean, in their defense, they're making a game that's supposed to be for people who aren't typically playing RPGs.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yes.
it's fine, but then just make it d20. You know, like do a D&D clone or whatever that tons of people do. If your goal isn't to do something interesting with a resolution mechanic, then don't. You know, just do something you know works.
I feel like that's an argument though, because I bet if you asked them, they thought they were doing something interesting with the resolution mechanic.
Yeah. I think that was my difference, being like, we want to have a system that's kind of like our style.
Yeah.
Because they do the same rules basically that you do for Star Trek Online or Star Trek Adventures, not Star Trek Online.
I want to
very different.
be clear too. I like Star Trek Adventure.
Well, that's
no,
what I'm saying.
okay.
But it's the same system as they use for Fallout, but with different
Yeah.
dice. But yeah.
Yeah, but Fallout I don't think was as successful. Star Trek Adventures is a great game.
Well,
I don't want
this is not
anybody.
the topic, but I would say I think Fallout's mistake is by making the dice custom made for that game instead of regular. Like,
Yeah,
I think that turns
custom
people
dice
off.
are really tricky to get to work properly.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I think my answer to the question is like, how do I prevent myself from it's not the actual question, but how do you decide what belongs in your collection? Is that luckily for me, my weird ADHD does not like a PDF very much. And so if a game is mostly if like that's like I will definitely peruse itch.io and I love it. And I like if someone like tells me like, oh, this is the game we're gonna play, go check it out, great. But as far as me just like getting a huge batch of games, I don't tend to do that because I know I'm not going to read them once I get them. Whereas if I'm in a space and there's like a bunch of really cool books, it's a lot harder for me to not pick up a book.
Yeah.
It's so I think a good book that will be in my collection is more likely to call my name because they'll look fun on my shelf. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two collections. I have my real physical collection, which I am very picky about. Like, very few things make the cut to being added to the physical collection at this point because it's so big and I actually require space in the world, which I don't have enough of. Much lower bar. Often, sometimes I just like the person making it, or hey, this is a cool title, or that art's pretty, is my PDF collection, which is very large at this point. And
I just quick aside, I bought If I Was a Lich Man on the title.
exactly, that's exactly what I thought of.
End of research. It also is nominated for an NE and is like
Really good,
outstanding,
yes.
great game. But I did not know that when I paid for it.
Exactly, and like Who's Your Daddy? Like
Yeah.
what we talk, like these are the things that make me smile, and I'm like, I'll buy that, especially because there's a joke about indie TTRPG designers that there's the same amount of money, and we all just keep passing it between each other's Kickstarters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our itch.io
It's like
funds.
service night for restaurants
Yeah.
where every restaurant employee is just tipping each other all the money.
Yeah,
they made.
yeah. It's just a homeostasis,
Yeah.
moving things around. Yeah.
So I like being generous because I hope that will then garner like generosity when people come do my games.
Sure.
But I also think it's really important that people like money is a way of showing interest and voting and votes of confidence, and also, hey, I like what you did.
Mm-hmm.
So I might not be up for having your book specifically on my shelf because I might not really plan on playing it.
Right.
But I'm totally willing to give you 10 or 15 or $20.
Yeah.
If you have a great concept that I can tell you put a lot of work into, because it's like art. And it may not be necessarily the form of art that I am going to, actually pull out and learn perfectly and play with my group a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm at a place in my life where luckily I can afford to, like, I see it as like when you walk by someone, who's busking and, on the street and they're singing a great song or playing fiddle really well. And you're just like, wow, that's amazing. And you throw money in their hat. You're not going to take home a CD from them.
Yeah.
But you're like, I am supporting you and I'm supporting your creation of your art because I think it's important and I want you to keep doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
This moment had value to me.
Yes, exactly. Just looking at your thing, your art, your layout, your idea, your funny title, whatever it was, the social, point you're making with your game,
Yeah.
all those things.
Yeah, I guess I do that too. Now that you've like spelled that out, like that actually does sound like I do that a lot too, especially with Kickstarters. Because like I want people to Kickstarter to succeed. I know like there's a barrier they have to hit. Not to bring up a topic that's fresh on your mind right now, but I guess it's weird because in my head I didn't think about that as like games that are in my collection, because I do kind of think of it sometimes as tossing money at a busker, and I'm like, well, I didn't collect that person's music. I just gave that person a little bit of money to help. And like there are sometimes where there's games where like, oh, I'll probably never get a chance to play this, but I like the concept of it, so I want it to do well, so that people who are going to play it can get access to it by having it exist. Like that's a thing that will happen sometimes for me as well. So, or like, oh, if this game does well, then maybe other games that are in this style will get made that might come back and appeal to me or my players. Like,
Yeah, that's the other thing. Another one that's nominated that I was real excited about is Salvage Union, which I first got sucked in because of the art, and then was looking through. I was like, oh, this could actually be pretty good. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I have the PDF that they put out pretty quickly, and the Kickstarter just, it's like closed out last year, I think, or whatever. But anyway, they're also nominated for an Annie. Awesome. Can't tell you why I was looking at the Annie list this week, but I know a bunch of stuff. And that's another example of a game where, like, I don't know if I'm going to play it right away, but I like what they're doing so much, and their take on Apocalypse and scavenging and salvaging, and that's kind of some stuff I'm working on, and I want to see how other people are doing it. Not necessarily to copy it, but is this admirable? Do I like what they did? What would I do differently? As I think about every rule in every game, the armor rules in Wild Talents notwithstanding. So yeah, that's pretty much. How do you find and decide what new RPG belongs in your collection?
Yeah. It's funny because it's at the point where I'm so plugged into the indie TTRPG scene that it's hard not to hear about new games. And it's interesting because I'm on so many like designer groups and stuff now that it's sometimes I hear about stuff and I'm really excited about it, and it's like, oh, you're still very, very much in the beginning of that. I'm not going to get this for like 3 years. Cool. Well, I'll cheer you on for the next 3 years while you do it. But yeah, I think Discord more and more has become kind of the place where I'm finding more and more stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because there's so many gaming communities that I'm in, and it's really easy to join way too many Discords. And I realize Discord's overwhelming for most people, and it's very overwhelming for me too. I tend to like have like 3 or 4 channels I focus on, and then I'll suddenly remember another one I really like exists, and I'll go check it out. Hi, Fear the Boot. Nice to see you. I saw you started the last 2 weeks checking that one again.
Yeah.
And it's just like that, and it's fun because like you kind of switch it up, and each one of the communities has a very different vibe often, and what kind of game they like to play. So suddenly I'll switch to another Discord, and they'll be recommending games with a totally different system and a very different vibe, and it's really neat. It's like going to different restaurants that have different types of food and like enjoying different things and hearing their recommendations, and then the next time going to a different one. So I really enjoyed that. And a lot of times it's straight from the horse's mouth. It's straight from the designers or people who have tracked the design. Because more and more, especially with indie games, we're finding people who like hear about a game, they've helped play test it, or if they've tracked the development of it, and they're like very like champions of it, and it's great to hear from people who are champions of games why they like it so much, and why they think you should get it because you'd like it too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that I get that kind of, like, I'm not plugged in the way that you are, but I know enough people who are plugged in the way that you are that I then get, like, the secondary broadcast of everything from y'all. For example, every time I come on this show, I typically learn about a wonderful indie designer.
Yeah.
Like for him, for example, Graham Gens. Like, what a great way. Like, so I do, like, and I feel like, often, frequently in the Discord for here or Discord for other channels that I have been on, like, I will almost always have conversations happening about indie games and cool games that people want to, like, check out and stuff like that.
Yeah. Or I just text Tomes.
Oh yeah. Just text Tomes. That's the answer for everyone. He'll be like, "Here's this game you've never heard of. It's amazing." He gave me a recommendation at the last con for a board game for my daughter, and it was perfect.
Oh, wow.
And, like, it was the most random thing, because, like, she's just at the point where she is very excited about Candyland, which everyone's criticism of it is true. It's not actually a game.
No.
But it teaches you how to, like, move a piece and count board squares,
and
which is
take a
very
turn.
important.
And
So then we graduated to Chutes and Ladders.
it's almost a game.
Yeah. Kind
Very
of a
close.
game. At least
very close to being a game.
very close to being a game. And then
Game of chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget what it was. It was like cats and mice of something. I forget what it's called. But and yeah, it's great, and she loves it. She's a board gamer, which hurts my heart a little bit, but maybe it'll graduate into
Oh, yeah. I mean,
RPG.
we all
Her
started
brain,
as
her
board
brain has
gamers,
not
like-
wrinkled enough
I
to
did it.
play narrative role playing.
Yeah.
I also, as somebody who likes certain kinds of systems, like Powered by the Apocalypse, a lot of times ways that I'll find games to add to my collection is just going, oh, I like PBTA. I wonder if there's a PBTA hack that is for this genre of story that I want to tell.
Yeah.
And I'll go look it
Yeah.
up, and I'll usually find, and yes, there's 30 of them.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Always like 30th.
Yeah. Shall I do third one as well?
No, I could do that one.
Okay.
Mailbag number 3 from the archive of 2019, 17. It was from the olden days.
The full time.
Yeah, I keep thinking, I'm like, oh, that was like 2 years ago. And you're like, no, it wasn't.
No, it was so many.
So many years ago. All right.
It was 35 years ago tonight.
84 years ago. Yeah. All right. Dear Happy Jacks. Jackers, I was wondering if you would feel there's a fundamental difference between fantasy style RPGs and science fiction style RPGs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
In the feel and play style of the game.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
And we're done. Thanks.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody. No. Okay. My group has been having this debate for a while, with half of us preferring future modern sci-fi, while the other prefers more traditional sword and sorcery fantasy games. Simple aesthetics aside, swords versus laser swords, steel armor versus Kevlar, etc., we feel that there are some very root differences between the two settings that lead to drastically different gameplay experiences, such as ready information access, easy mobility between locations, moral nuance of actions, lethality of combat for some reason, permanence of consequences, assumed financial burdens, emphasis on long-range interpersonal combat encounters, etc. Wanted to get your opinion on if any of these are valid, and if you can think of other examples of ways in which sci-fi and fantasy games just play different. And if so, which overall experience do you prefer and why? Thanks. Sam from Lakewood.
I wonder why you picked this.
Far in the past.
I wonder why you picked this one.
Mostly because of Jason and I, because we've had this conversation many times.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Much to my delight, Kimmy told me I was right about something.
you were.
So, what was I right about, Kimmy?
Okay, so we disagreed about this, and I told you you were wrong, and then I thought about it for a really long time, and you were right. So I put it into Starscape without ever telling you until like a week ago. But so you're big. But you should tell your thesis.
Okay, all right. So my this is not a value judgment or a good or bad thing, but in my experience, fantasy games benefit from a focus on attributes and will probably have fewer skills. There are lots of reasons for that, but that's the very top line. And then high tech or sci-fi games will benefit from less focus on attribute and more focus on skills and maybe augmentations and things like that. But the basic thing is sci-fi, lots of skills. Fantasy, not as many skills. And that's the basic premise that I start from.
Yeah, at first I thought, it was like, no, that doesn't make sense. And then I like thought about it for a really long time, and I was like, no, that makes perfect sense. Because there's a reason, like, you know, on the bridge of the Enterprise, like Worf and a bunch of humans are all doing very important, equally important jobs. And when you're talking about like laser guns and stuff for most of it, it doesn't matter so much. Like if you're suddenly like pulling out your, you know, your Klingon blade, that's a little bit of a different fight.
Yeah, I was going to do it too. Yeah.
I was afraid I was going to say it wrong, so I
Yeah.
was like, I'm going to say it wrong. I don't want to say it. But
I probably said bot left, so yeah.
yeah, I was
The treble clef.
Yeah, the treble clef. That'd be badass. Like one of those super sharp that looks like a treble clef. Yeah, okay.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
That has to have had on Lower Decks at some point,
I'm
right?
sure it
Yeah.
had to.
I've watched all of it. And
Yeah, it should. But you know, those things where you can brute force your way through things don't happen as often in most sci-fi. Now there are sci-fi that are a little bit different, but for our normal general sci-fi, if you are trained in something, you are just as valuable and just as important, maybe more important than someone who's super strong.
Right.
So like in
Yeah.
Firefly, Jane is super strong. Kaylee, like, most of the time more important because if Trinity doesn't keep flying, everybody's dead.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about knights on a field of battle, the biggest and the fastest and the strongest is going to win 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And that matters there, right? So I'm not saying that's a bad, but I think I enjoy sci-fi stuff more because I like that idea of training and learning and skill-based stuff and like what does that technology do, and it sort of evening the playing field between where you were born, right? Like where you started. Where in a fantasy or at least medieval European fantasy, you're born with and you've got what you got and you can leverage that or not. And
I also think, going off of your thing about attributes and skills, I think there is some truth to that as well, because I do think that I think both fantasy and sci-fi have archetypes, of course. But I think, like, for example, I think where skills come more into play is that I think in sci-fi, your skills are much more, like fine-tuned and like honed in on. Because, like, you talking about the battlefield in fantasy, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna have your brute fighter, or you're gonna have your quick, nimble, dexterous thief type person, or you're gonna have your magic caster who's good with like wisdom because they use spells or whatever, or like some sort of intelligence.
Right.
But it's an attribute. It's a broad category.
Right.
You're like to use D&D, it's one that has the main 6 attributes. Your skills are fed from your attributes. Like your sleight of hand is good because your dexterity is good, and you get better sleight of hand. Whereas like on the Enterprise, everybody is a nerd. Like every single person on the bridge crew of the Enterprise is smart. Like there's
nobody
so many
has
episodes,
-1 intelligence.
There's so many episodes where like even Worf is doing like quantum mechanics. It's
Right.
like, well, the captain likes to keep on top of our basic
right.
sci-fi mumbo jumbo. But like for example, Geordie LaForge is super, super smart at doing engineering things, but he's not necessarily going to be as smart as Beverly Crusher at doing medical things. And so it's like, I think that's why sci-fi is so much more about what your skill set is.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I blanked on her name. She flies the ship. And it's the whole thing. And it's Ortiz.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Erica Ortiz. I fly the
Ortiz,
ship. And
yeah.
like, she's very smart and she's very skilled and she flies the ship. And even when she's lost all her memories, she knows how to fly the ship because that is her skill, you know? And like Nurse Chapel knows how to be a bisexual disaster. And it's fantastic.
Amen for that.
Yeah. And like, but yeah, everyone in sci-fi, so sci-fi is much more about the nitty gritty, like thing you're very good at doing and like why you're here.
Yeah.
Whereas in fantasy, it's much more like this is our broad category of things that in general I'm good at. And it's like that's why you get that kind of storytelling when you see fictional stories set in those kinds of things too. Like you're going to see a lot more, like, you know, typically if you see sci-fi that veers out of that is when you're definitely veering heavily more into space opera. Like when you're getting into Star Wars, you're getting your scoundrel and your
like
warrior.
the Star Wars land battles between clone troopers and droids make no sense whatsoever. You would just bombard them from space. Like it's stupid, but it's fun. Like that's not a judgment.
I mean, it has happened multiple times, but yeah.
Right, but like when you have spaceships, you don't line up troops and crash into each other like they're toys on a table, right? It's just, it's going to work differently. But it also is the product of somebody who couldn't think past the fact that he was ripping off Shogun and like, you know, whatever. The thing, like the characters care about different stuff, right? Like if you have these knights on a battlefield and you drop one guy in there with a fucking machine gun, it's done, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, in real life, that is what the big thing that happened with World War I, is that the soldiers who were going off to fight World War I weren't prepared for the horrors of what machine gun-based warfare and that
Right.
kind of thing was like.
and,
Like,
and that
that's
could
why,
be
yeah.
a medium-sized guy with no armor, a machine gun on a hill, and it's done. Like there's the whole battle is done.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's not saying don't play the knights and wizards and whatever. It's just they care about different stuff. And just aren't that many things to learn.
Yeah.
You know?
I think one thing that kind of stands out to me are the mechanics involved with body type often.
Yeah.
And there are sci-fi systems that have that as well. I'm not going to excuse sci-fi systems, RPG systems. Generally in sci-fi, like actual like stories, it doesn't matter quite so much depending.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, FFG Star Wars tried to do a lot with alien biology.
Yeah.
But
yeah. But like, I mean, the original D&D had different stats for women. You know,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So it's like this, it was important enough to that system to be like, no, this is smaller and less, and that can be a problem. So I don't know, I feel like that in and of itself is like a pretty clear description of it. I think there's also a lot of differences. While like fantasy stuff can be incredibly dangerous, like dragons, don't want to fuck with dragons. But there's this weird fragility in sci-fi about like just the scope of actual outer space and the danger of it. Mm-hmm. And eventually every sci-fi property gets around to the episode or the couple episodes where the ship stops working. Mm-hmm. And you're boned.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do. And you know, and that's not something, while you get into very dangerous situations in fantasy often, you're not usually in a situation where literally you're stuck and you're in a few hours, you're not going to have air. Like you might be trapped in a dungeon, you might be in a volcano, whatever you are, there's not like, it's a different type of danger scenario.
even if you are trapped in a dungeon, theoretically, you could dig your way out, right? Like, if you're stuck on a spaceship with no gas, I'm thinking of the Out of Gas episode. Like, I love that episode of Firefly.
The second episode I've been on in the last...
I've been talking about it a lot because
it came up.
Talked about
started-
gas.
We had a guest, our audience question that was about Traveler, and it was very much a scenario. Now, like a bunch of bad rolls led them being in an unmapped area of the galaxy.
Oh, I would listen to that. Yeah, that was good.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off,
that's
sorry.
okay. It's just that is a whole different existential problem where if you can dig your way out of the dungeon, there's air, there's earth, there's sky, you know, like if you're on a spaceship, you're fucked.
Water, there's heart. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, all of those things. And then the Fire Nation attacks.
Yeah.
That's just what popped in my head about that.
I think I think that lends to just very different stories.
Yeah.
Both are kind of nomadic traveling often, which is kind of an interesting parallel for them. Visiting different places, experiencing different things. But I think that mode of travel and often in sci-fi stuff, you might be like pretty cool and badass. Like even if you're on the Enterprise or whatever, like, yeah, you're pretty badass. There's more badass out there, and you're just walking around a planet, you're probably a little outmatched for most things. I feel like fantasy adventuring parties, maybe not on level 1, but like once you get to a certain point, you're kind of walking around with, you know, the level of threat around you has to go up and up and up and higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
With this power creep that I feel like isn't often as big a thing with like sci-fi systems. Fantasy Flight and Jedi and stuff aside, because that's a little bit more fantasy, honestly,
Yeah.
than it is sci-fi. Even
Fantasy Flight.
though, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's
Star Wars is fantasy with a sci-fi
Right,
yeah.
filter. Like
Yeah.
I love it, but it is
Yeah.
it is wizards with laser swords.
Yeah.
Like, it is
the
it is-
spaceships whoosh
Yeah.
through space.
Yeah.
It's fine. We
Yeah.
love Star Wars. It's not science fiction.
no.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's not as much power creep often in like sci-fi type stories.
Yeah. Well, and all things because I mean, fantasy characters typically are meant to be heroes in the classical sense. Like they're meant to be larger than life people who are like standing above.
Yeah.
Like you know, they're supposed to be Jason with the Argonauts. They're supposed to
Yeah.
be like that kind of Hercules. But they're supposed to like that's what sword and sorcery type story is all about. And I think that people who are sitting down to make fantasy games are coming at it from that angle typically, whereas people who are sitting down to play a sci-fi game or build a sci-fi game are not like, even I mean D&D began existing because basically they were doing mini games like mini battles and like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do mini battles that were like the battles in Lord of the Rings and our fantasy novels that
Right.
we like. And so like that's why the game grew out of that, and games that are similar
Right.
that grew out of that. Whereas somebody sitting down, like I don't know anybody who may have made a sci-fi game recently, but I feel like people who sit down to make a sci-fi game are not going, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we just put D&D in space? Like
Right.
they're saying, what do I like about sci-fi stories, and how would I replicate those stories in a book setting or
Yeah.
in a game setting, I should say. Like, and that is where I think the difference is like, and the same thing if you take it out of just even like tabletop RPGs, like even like a video game. Like I think that there's a really big difference between the way that typically sci-fi video games play versus the way fantasy video games play. Like, of course, there are plenty of sci-fi video games that are just getting progressively bigger guns. Like that is
Sure.
absolutely
Yeah.
a thing that happens. But and there's a lot of unfortunately, Jason, there are tons of sci-fi games that are about fighting battles on weird planets against alien bugs and stuff.
Yeah.
So that is the thing.
Yeah.
But in general, I think that people sitting down to build a sci-fi story, they're building from all the sci-fi they've been watching their entire life and going like, okay, what are the elements of sci-fi stories? So like, whether it's Stargate, whether it is, we talk about Star Trek a lot. Star Trek kind of even itself veers onto space opera at times. But, you've got those kinds of things, like even like more modern stuff like The Expanse. Like, you're right, that fragility of life is an indelible part of those stories because space is always right there on the outside. And it's like that's part of the draw of a sci-fi story, especially when you're talking about space sci-fi, is like, oh, we're pressing out against the universe.
Yeah.
We're going further than anyone has ever gone before, and we're going out into these like that part of that challenge is then replicating that feeling of
Yeah.
of breaking further and further into the void in a way that I think like is very different than fantasy.
That's interesting. I wonder, because I feel like people who are new to gaming and maybe haven't played fantasy games before maybe have that feeling when they're exploring in like sword and sorcery fantasy games.
Like exploring the
Yeah,
dark woods
unknown,
where no
yeah.
one's
That's true.
been. Yeah.
So I wonder if it's one of those things where, like in space, it's like it's that feeling, but like times 1,000. Because even if you are a very experienced gamer, you never know what's going to happen on the next planet or what the next
Well,
thing's going to happen.
I'd be curious who's had a similar experience to me, and you should come on the Discord, happyjacks.org/Discord, and at me about this. I did not start with fantasy games.
Okay.
I started with sci-fi.
Oh,
Because I hadn't read Lord of the Rings, and I just didn't like fantasy fiction. I read a lot of science fiction. And so I knew if I was going to play a game, I was looking for that. Now, I started with Shadowrun. That's a whole thing. But I remember thinking, oh, this is funny. They have Uzis and orcs, right? Like, this is an interesting combination, blah, blah, blah. I enjoyed that. But then immediately wanted, I wanted I wanted like cyberpunk stories. I wanted space exploration. I wanted all those types of games. I didn't play D&D until college.
yeah.
And so and D&D for me often felt like a much smaller story. Not in a value judgment way, but just we're focused on this region of this country and this one necromancer, or whatever. And, but it'll spill over and be a big problem, but we got to take him out now before it turns into that. And then, like, that was an interesting change of pace for me. But I've never been able to get away from the superheroes, the sci-fi, like all that kind of stuff, which just felt more. And again, this is probably just a preference, not even, I almost said taste, but what I mean is preference of like, I like science fiction explanations for things where like the Human Torch is just as much a fantasy concept as anything else.
It's a modern mythology.
It's complete bullshit, right? But a story of the crew of in the Expanse, the Rocinante, like that felt real, like it made me feel things, and that was exciting, and that tension of being out in the black and dealing with all that was a different. I've never had that feeling with, and I love the Lord of the Rings movies, but it just feels different. It's a different.
I wonder
experience.
if it's our modern sensibility for travel, because I feel like back in you olden days, like taking a trip and going that far, whether you're driving or whatever, like going across a whole kingdom would seem like a much bigger thing than it is now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's less than 5 miles from my house to here.
Right.
But on a horse, how long
Or
would that
foot.
take?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's say I had a
And
horse.
fighting monsters along the way.
Yeah, it'd probably take an hour or so.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big commitment of time.
Yeah.
For the day, right? And then you're going to go back and do before dark.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't have headlights. So, like, you have to do all this in that span of time where the sun is up.
Yeah.
And that's just an entirely different kind of story.
Yeah.
Where versus like, well, yeah, we have flashlights and sleeping bags and
Yeah. Well, it's like you see it even in like actual like period pieces and stories like that, where like someone comes to someone's home for something and they're like, you have to stay the night. It's too dark to go out in the woods. It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like a 4-hour ride back to your house because it's a couple miles away, and you are the closest neighbor, but it's like
It's on the other side of the town.
Yeah.
Which is like, it might as well be another like another planet in
Yeah.
Star Trek. It's interesting you brought up that you started with sci-fi games and not fantasy, because I started with neither. I started with gothic horror games. I started with
like a modern day.
I started
gothic horror.
with White Wolf. I started with Vampire the Masquerade.
Sure.
My first game was Werewolf the Apocalypse and a little bit of Vampire the Masquerade, and that's a little bit fantasy as well. But it's those games are very much based in the idea of like something is wrong with the world you live in just below the surface, and that's kind of what
But it changes the fact that you can text somebody, hop on a plane, you can, like, those are all parts of the world that I think, it's really a question of modern versus ancient or medieval or whatever. Like, that's...
Yeah. But I think it's funny because I think the things that are part of those games are also different than what's part of sci-fi and fantasy. But I do think, like, to your point about sci-fi, I think even those games where you can soak a lot of damage and you can heal supernaturally and stuff like that, they are much more skills based. Like the 90s White Wolf games, I should say World of Darkness, because I don't think White Wolf even exists anymore, I don't think. But the 90s World of Darkness games were all D10 based, so it was all skills. They remind me a lot of, like, even though it's a different dice system, but like when you play Call of Cthulhu, it's like you have nothing but skills in Call of Cthulhu, and you just roll so much percentage dice for every possible thing your character could do as a skill. And I would say Call of Cthulhu is much, much more like the frailty of humanity in all of your characters, and the idea of like a vast horror just below the surface. I think but I do think there's a lot of similarities in what you'll find in a Call of Cthulhu game, what you'll find in a World of Darkness game, and they're going to be different than what you're going to find in a Sword and Sorcery high fantasy game, or either a cyberpunk or spacefaring sci-fi game. So.
It's interesting too to think about the fact that those World of Darkness games came from the pre-cell phone era.
Yeah.
That was beginning, but it wasn't as...
It wasn't a smartphone.
It's very different now, and it's interesting to see that map onto the current day stuff. Even Shadowrun updated, like in 4th or 5th edition, they're like, ooh, what if some of our computers were wireless, though? Like the fact that you had to go to a computer and physically plug yourself into
Yeah.
Yeah.
it was so cool in 1989.
Yeah.
But
Amazing.
by the late 90s, they were kind of like, oh, but Wi-Fi is a thing. Shit. What do we do?
It was like a thing that I played as a techno mage in Mage the Ascension when I was in the 90s and like early 2000s, where like one of their abilities was that they could like hack into computers without touching them, and it was like,
Wow.
or like
Yeah.
like you didn't have to be plugged into the internet to like you have to like be hooked up to a LAN cable, or not LAN, like a modem to like no, what if the magic is the modem? Like it's like now it's like no, you're talking about Wi-Fi. You're talking about
Amazing. All right. Yeah, I feel like there's definitely differences. It's not just skinning it to be a little different. They're
Yeah.
totally different stories they tell.
yeah.
And a lot of it does have to do like you even mentioned like the consequences, travel, stuff like that you mentioned in your email. I feel like all of those are like support beams that hold up very different stories. So it's not any one of those things. All of those things make it so you tell stories about exploration on a different scale or power fantasies and things like that. I think those are two very different things.
Yeah.
And I think like sci-fi is different than fantasy in the way we approach it, because like fantasy we've kind of written off as like, well, of course this isn't real. Of course this is like this is not our actual history unless you really get into Tolkien's whole mythology. But with sci-fi, even like there is that vague hint of sci-fi of like, oh, this could come to pass. Like this is sci-fi still, I think, tickles part of our imagination in a way that we imagine it like this is the future that could come to be, and it makes us feel like it's aspirational.
Well, or cautionary.
Yeah,
Right? And I think
100%.
that's where science fiction really does a lot of like, this is cautionary, this is an analogy, and maybe this is extreme.
Yeah.
Like nobody thinks Dune could literally happen, but it is about rampant capitalism and the oligarchy just having complete and total power and the abuse of that, right?
Yeah, and like Strange New World is basically like, how can you create a dystopia where no one understands that we're in a dystopia?
Right.
Which might be relevant for some reason. I don't know why that's popping into my head. But yeah, I think that's like where I think horror even and fantasy, I think there's a catharsis to it. There is an element, but sci-fi, for better or for worse, depending on the story, really does tickle the kind of, oh, but could this happen kind of feeling.
And kind of a reflection on humanity in general.
Yeah.
Like, is this, what do we want to be? What are going to be our values? And what do we see as lasting?
Yeah.
Where fantasy is more like what do we value about, the human experience in, like we were saying, these heroes' journeys and becoming a power fantasy and becoming these things, where sci-fi is much more a commentary on like what we want and what we desire humanity to be as a whole.
You might say it's a black mirror.
I don't get that. No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Are we good? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam from Lakewood from years and years ago. I don't know if you still listen, but if you do, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Maybe not from Lakewood anymore. Maybe
Somewhere else.
Maybe
Yeah, right in.
Sam, who was from
Lakewood, yes, formerly known as, Thank you for joining us for Season 34, Episode 3 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. Please support our amazing Indie Designer of the Month, Graham Gentz, and you can find his games at grahamgentz.itch.io. I spelled it in the top of the show, so go back and listen to it. I'd like to thank our chat mod, James V, and to all our amazing patrons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their amazing ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. I promise patrons I will do like our newsletter like Tuesday afternoon. as soon as
don't promise Tuesday afternoon. Come on, give yourself a chance to breathe.
It'll be fine.
Tuesday night.
Yeah, it'll be fine. I'll be sitting.
Look, they
there.
won't hear this until after Tuesday. So
That's
just
true.
Give them
It'll be fine.
You'll get it when you get it.
Yeah,
I'm
I'll be
kidding. No, we
refreshing
love
the
you.
page on the internet all day anyway, so I might as well do
Yeah.
something else while I'm there.
You get it when you get it and you don't complain.
No, they're wonderful. They can come. You can come. You're great.
They like being treated this way.
Yeah. All right. Mama says take it. You're fine. All right. Host name. Oh yeah, that's me. Hi, I'm Kimmy.
Host name.
I'm cool. I'm great. Everything's fine. I'm Kimmy. That's your cue. Go.
Oh, right. I'm Jason. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter and Blue Sky at It's Probably Okay. And I stream on my channel a whole bunch, and more stuff coming. But really, you should go to goldenlassogames.com/Kickstarter whenever this is, and back it, or learn about what happened 10 years ago when you're listening to this 10 years hence, and how one game took over the industry and became the shining light beacon of all game design for the future of all time. It aligned the planets. It brought harmony and peace to the people of Earth.
All right,
And then the Fire Nation attacked.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Riley. You can find me on Blue Sky and on X, or not X, I'm not on X. Blue Sky or Threads as Riley Silverman. And listen to the Troubled Waters podcast. The Troubled Waters podcast, which is a pop culture trivia game podcast on the Maximum Fun Network that I'm very happy to have been the head writer for several years now. It's quite a fun show, hosted by Dave Holmes, and I like doing it. And I don't think I've ever pitched. I usually promote game stuff on here, but it is a game. It's a trivia game. It's very fun, and actually, I'm excited because the next 2 months I have a special guest co-writer on the show, Danielle Radford, because our current co-writer, John Luke Roberts, who is from the UK, is currently mounting a wild number of shows at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival this year. And so we have John Luke is currently on hiatus from the show, and filling in for him is the very funny, also very talented gamer, Danielle Radford. But she's also very, very funny and very good writer. So excited to have her on the team for a little bit.
Awesome. I have one more call to action. So some of you know that I am co-chair of the Pathways Committee for GAMA, which is the Game Manufacturers Association. We are working to elevate marginalized and historically underrepresented people in the game industry. So we have what's called the Horizons Fellowship, which is an intensive for businesses and also kind of a scholarship program for retailers and publishers. If you want to apply, if you are from a historically underrepresented group and you'd like to apply, you can go to gamma.org/horizons. There's an application there. You can read all about the program, what you need to apply, all these things. It does provide for up and coming and new publishers and retailers who are either about to have or have a new retail location or store. Trips to Gamma Expo, trips to Origins, and booth space at both of those things, grants, a mentor that you work with for the 9 months of the program, and you speak with them at least once a month, and they talk with you about the industry and give you advice and all these things. And then we also have multiple kind of learning opportunities a month where you can log in and hear panels and ask questions of industry leaders about very specific topics. I participated in it this last year. It revolutionized my understanding of the game industry. If you're interested, please again go to gama.org/horizons.
Sorry, I forgot one really big piece of news from last week.
Okay, good.
Demigods, the game I made, is available in store now. I can't say stores because it's just one store. But if you go to Geeky Teas in Burbank, they have a website. It's TEAS because they also make custom tea that you can drink. It's on the shelf there. Yay! It's really fun for me.
Awesome.
It's available in the store. And
so cool.
on Saturday the 20th or 19th of July, whatever that day is.
I think the 19th is a Friday. So it's
Okay, so Saturday the 20th, whatever that Saturday is, we're doing a book signing at 2 p.m. at Geeky Teas. And if you bought the book,
The 20th.
you can, great, thank you, July 20th. You can bring your copy and I'll sign it. If you want to buy a copy at the store, that would be awesome. Support the store. They do lots of cool stuff over there. So hope you'll come by and support the shop. It's at a new location at Main and Alameda. Sorry, I just say things wrong on purpose.
It made me very upset. Like, I was like, what?
Alameda.
Oh, no.
Alameda Boulevard.
No.
I had the fortune of hearing Sepulveda before I said it out loud, and I would have said it wrong.
Yes.
But anyway, very exciting. It's in store now.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. Today we're going to leave you with a song called the Agincourt Carol by the Poxy Boggards, and you can find them at poxyboggards.com. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Our king went forth to Normandy with grace and might of chivalry. Their God for him wrought marvelously, wherefore England may call and sparred neither least nor most, till he came to Agincourt coast. Then, forsooth, that comely knight in Agincourt field did manly fight. Through grace of God most mighty, he won both field and victory. Deo gratias, Deo gratias, Anglia, Rede pro victoria. Then dukes and earls, lord and baron, were taken slain, and that well soon. And some were led into London with joy and mirth and great renown. Now gracious God, he save our King, his people and all his good willing. Give him good life and good ending, that we with mirth may safely sing.